Thank you for joining us today, Coach Huggins. Members
My
of the
pleasure.
media, questions for Coach. Our first one comes from John Antoni, WVUsports.com.
Hugs, I'm curious how you've approached it with these guys having all this downtime by themselves. I understand their protocols basically confine them to their rooms unless you're with them. How have you dealt with that? And then the second part of that is you don't need a curfew with the bubble, but I'm sure with some of your teams in the past, you probably could have helped use some of that.
I guess yes and no. I don't, I think they've been fine. I think the hardest was yesterday when you had to stay in your own room and you couldn't fraternize with any of your teammates. And I think going to practice last night really helped get guys together. And now that they're allowed to be around each other a little bit more, it's been fine.
Justin Jackson, Morgantown Dominion Post.
Hey, Coach, kind of a question here off the game. There's two coaches who grew up in Morgantown in the NCAA tournament this year. Obviously, you. I was wondering if you knew Zach Spiker, if you'd ever run across his path before. He's coaching Drexel against Illinois on Friday. Just kind of thought it was interesting. Two Morgantown guys coaching in the NCAA tournament.
Well, his father was our trainer. I think it was my senior year. So I knew Big Spike pretty well, but I didn't know Zach.
Greg Hunter, Blue and Gold News.
So, Bob, now that you're in the bubble, what do you think of the bubble that the NCAA has put together? Good stuff, bad stuff that you're witnessing?
I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I don't know what else they would do. There's going to be some positives when you put this many people together, I would assume. But I mean, they're trying the best they possibly can. I think letting teams go get out and practice yesterday was a big step in getting those guys back to a little bit of normalcy.
Next question from Cody Nesper, WV Sports Now.
Hey, Coach. A couple weeks ago, you talked about how lucky you were as a young coach to be around guys like Bob Knight. And I'm just thinking Friday's game might be like that for Coach Spradlin. I'm just wondering how you feel now that you're kind of on the other side of that scenario.
I really don't think about it, to be honest with you. Deuce came in and said he just ran into Roy Williams, and Roy said hi. I've coached against, virtually everybody. You coach as many games as I have. I've coached against the majority of at least the older guys that are here. I don't know. You guys think I think about things a lot more than I actually do. I kind of have decided that, in my old age that I'm gonna try to enjoy this as much as I possibly can. And I love being around our guys. I love being around our staff. So I don't really need a whole lot more.
John Raby, Associated Press.
Hi, Bob. With so many challenges this season, among them was Oscar's departure. How were you able to adapt the roster and react to that and keep this team on a path to the NCAA tournament? And has there been a player or a combination that's kept it going?
Well, I think the reality is when Oscar left, we became a much better offensive team because we could spread people. I think the challenge was when we had Derek and Oscar both, that we kind of, it seemed like at times ran out of room. And being able to spread people, and I think Deuce said it probably as well as it can be said. JB came in, did a great job of making shots and giving us somebody else who they couldn't sag off of, who they couldn't double team Derek with, or whomever our post guy was at that time. So you know, I think in a lot of ways, it was a help. I think what hurt us was when Isaiah got hurt, because Isaiah is a 6'10", 6'11" guy who can make shots. We didn't have, when we had those two post guys, neither one of them could make a shot from the perimeter. Now JB could make a shot. Isaiah could have made a shot, and I think that really hurt us because he can pass the ball. You know, those guys are not our best passers. Obviously, Derek was a little bit better passer, but it changed the way we play. But I think it changed the way we play for a positive. As a positive, and that's not certainly a knock on anybody. I just think we're a better basketball team now, and I think if we had Isaiah, which gives us another big and somebody who's more of a factor around the rim, that's what hurt us. That's the biggest thing that I think affected us this season was him getting hurt.
Ryan Fritt, Charleston Gazette Mail.
Hey, Bob, I kind of wanted to piggyback on something you just said about kind of really making sure you enjoy this thing now. I'm assuming that maybe wasn't always the case when you were a younger coach getting into these tournaments. Just how has that perspective kind of evolved over the years and over your career, and what kind of mentality do you bring into it now that's maybe different than it was then?
Well, my first NCAA tournament, I was at Akron, and we played Michigan, who was the #1 ranked team in the country all year. And my center was a 6-foot football player who I watched for 2 years, was the last one cut by the Steelers 2 consecutive years. And I'm rooting like heck for him because I want him to make an NFL team. But at the same time, I also want him to come back and be my center. So, you know, that was, you know, you kind of, after that game's over with, and that was Gary Grant and Tarpley and Joe Bear and that whole group that they had, which was a great group. And we ended up losing by 4 and really had a chance, I thought, until, you know, at the end, they were just so talented, but we lose by 4. And, you know, now you go out there and you say, how do you ever win? You know, how am I ever supposed to win when other people have teams like that? And then my first year at Cincinnati, not my first year at Cincinnati, but my first year when we actually could go out and recruit and get guys. And that was Eric Martin and Corey Blunt and Nick Van Exel and Herb Jones and so forth and so on. The first time those guys were in the NCAA tournament, we went to the Final Four. So now you start looking around saying, maybe we can do this, you know? And I don't know. I've had some terrible disappointments, and I've also had some great wins that other people didn't think were possible. So I guess when you do it, as long as a lot of us have done it, you're going to have ups and downs. My biggest regret is that when we were the best team in the country and Kenyon Martin broke his leg, for those guys, and particularly for Kenyon. And the same thing with Day. You know, when Day went down in the Final Four, I mean, we had no chance after that. And just because of the emotion that obviously our guys were faced with. And the same thing happened in Cincinnati with Kenyon. So those are the things that I think really have bothered me more than anything, is that those guys didn't have an opportunity to fulfill their dreams.
Hayes Gardner, Louisville Courier Journal.
I'm curious about Sean McNeil, and I'm curious how you first discovered him at Sinclair and what drew you to recruiting him.
Well, obviously, I know most people in Ohio, most basketball people in Ohio, and I kept getting calls. You know, Hugs, you got to go see this guy. You got to go see this guy. So obviously, I went to Dayton and watched some practice, and really fell in love with him as a person. I think first and foremost, he's a great human being, but it's even better that he can make shots. And the more I watched him, the more I liked him. I thought he would fit in great with us. He's a lot like the guys that we have, just really good, kind of unassuming people that love basketball and love to work at their game of basketball. So he fit in perfect with us.
Mike Kazaza, 247 Sports.
Hey, Bob, how are you?
Good, Mike.
Now that you've probably had some time to look at Morehead State, I don't think you had that liberty yet on Sunday when we talked to you. What do you see from them defensively, where they have some pretty impressive rankings, and then offensively, where effective but don't play with a lot of tempo, and seem like they have a ton of turnovers too?
Well, I think defensively, Mike, it's not pack line, but it certainly has a pack line likeness. When you catch the ball, you have to understand you got 10 eyes on you. They're gonna guard the guy with the ball and really gap everything. Try not to give up any penetration. Try to make them shoot the ball over top of you. We've got to do a good job of moving them. Hopefully we can get them spread with the number of people we're going to put on the floor who conceivably can make shots. We've got hopefully an advantage with Derek against a guy who's very, very talented, but he's a freshman. So, we gotta accentuate our positives and try to stay away from our negatives.
Coach Huggins, this is from Bob Herzl, the Clarksburg Exponent in Fairmont Times. Coach Huggins, 10 years ago, Morehead upset Rick Pitino in Louisville in the NCAA. You had a similar experience with Stephen F. Austin. Have you changed anything in preparation to avoid something like this happening?
Well, this is entirely different with the bubble. I think probably we have a little bit more control than what you had with the Stephen F. Austin thing. I don't know what we would have changed. Generally whenever something like that happens, you have an idea of what you would like to have done better. We told those guys and told those guys and told those guys, and we showed them film after film after film about how good they were, how well they ran their offense. If it didn't do any good, they just felt like that. I think they were going to win regardless. And obviously they jumped up and hit us square in the mouth, and we didn't respond very well. But this is an entirely different group. This is not the same group. So I think every group's different. I think you try to accentuate the positive and stay away from the negative. I think that's just not basketball. That's life.
Jared Siri from the Daily Athenaeum.
Hey, Coach. I was just curious about, with the roster shakeup that you had a little bit toward the midpoint of the season, do you think that lit kind of a fire under Deuce to kind of, take a little more of an initiative, say, hey, I can be a focal point, a leader of this team?
No, I think if you lit any more fire underneath the Deuce, you'd have a forest fire. Deuce doesn't need lit up. He's a guy who comes in every day and works. He's a guy who spends countless hours on his own working on his game. Deuce doesn't need the motivation of somebody transferring out to play harder or work harder. I don't know that he could do any better at either area.
Charles Montgomery, Daily Athenaeum.
Coach, you've talked about positives and negatives going into this game. Can you look at the lack of NCAA tournament experience as either a positive or negative with this team?
No, as I shared with you earlier, we went out and recruited Eric Martin, Corey Blunt, Nick Van Exel, so forth and so on, and went to the Final Four. And their expectation was they do it every year, which obviously, we got beat in the Elite Eight the next year, in a buzzer beater against Carolina. You can't take anything for granted. I think these guys of all people understand that. I can't predict who reacts to whatever. It's the biggest stage, obviously, that these guys are ever going to play on. You hope that they respond well to it. I think, we've looked at enough film. Certainly we're going to prepare enough that we ought to know what's going on, what we need to do, and what we need to try to prevent them from doing. But other than that, I'm not a psychic.
Members of the media, we're running short on time. We'll try to get all your questions in. Please, no follow-ups, one question only. Next question from John Antonic, WVUsports.com.
Got to ask you this, Hugs. I don't know if this was passed along to you, but ESPN.com ranked all of the coaches from last to first as players.
A little disappointed I was ninth, John.
Well, I was going to ask you, you were 9. Was that on the money or was that a little low?
No, that's probably pretty close. Probably pretty close.
Greg Carey, Metro News.
Bob, you mentioned you thought, Derek and their big Joni Broom, I think, would be a pretty good matchup. What do you see, particularly his last game? I think he had 27 points and double-figure rebounds. Obviously, Bradlin said earlier this week he thought they played through their big a little bit more than West Virginia plays through Culver. So I'm just kind of curious how you saw that matchup and how important each of those guys.
That's why Lav's sitting behind a desk now, not on a bench. He reminds me of Chris Bosh. He's got that kind of that push shot that he gets away very quickly. He shares the ball in the post, which is important. So he doesn't get gang guarded as much because he is such a good passer. You hope that Derek's experience and certainly Derek's physicality would bode well for Derek and for us.
Michael Sussman, WMOV.
Coach, you went into some of your past NCAA tournament success earlier. Obviously, the 2010 WVU team and the 92 Cincinnati team stand out among the rest. Do you sense a similar chemistry and togetherness with this group compared to those squads?
Well, believe it or not, the year we got beat in Brooklyn, I thought we had a heck of a team. We didn't respond to the challenge the way that I think those other teams did. I think we took a team for granted, which is not a very smart thing to do in a 1-and-out situation.
Ethan Bach, Blue Gold Sports.
Hey, Coach. So on Sunday night, you said you weren't too familiar with Morehead State. And after watching your 4 or 5 games on them, is there anything that stands out or that's concerning for you guys from the film that you watched?
Yeah, they got a lot of guys who can make shots. They really do a good job of spreading the ball, and obviously the post guy is very, very good, which it's hard to get help. It's hard to get help there whenever you surround them with the guys that they surround them with, because they're all very capable of making shots. They're all very capable of having big nights.
John Raby, Associated Press.
Bob, I wanted to ask you about Brad Underwood when you were at K-State. What did you see in him that made you want to hire him? And can you talk about the job he's done in Illinois?
Well, I've known Brad for a long time. We recruited Art Long when Brad was at Dodge City, was the head coach at Dodge City Community College. And so Larry and I have known Brad for a long time, and then run into Brad in the summertime, and with all the recruiting stuff, the AAU stuff, and continue to talk to Brad and have a relationship with Brad. And then really Brad was the guy who engineered the worst loss I've ever had in the NCAA tournament in Brooklyn. So yeah, I mean, I talked to Brad afterwards, kind of about what they did to prepare and that kind of thing. And then when I went to K-State, Brad's a K-Stater. He was a 2-year starter at K-State for Coach Hartman. So that was an easy hire.